I just saw a movie named Maria, and suddenly my Oscar predictions have changed. Maria. Hello, my name is Ben Friedman, and today I am reviewing the film Maria, which is directed by Pablo Larraín and stars Angelina Jolie. This is her kind of big comeback to Hollywood. She's been working for the past few years, but this is certainly a lead central role, one that has kind of made her critically acclaimed and beloved in her career. And to be honest, I didn't know what to expect from this movie. I like Pablo Larraín maybe more than most people do. I think his last film centered around a famous historical female, Spencer, I thought was incredibly brilliant and well done, and that performance by Stewart is just absolutely incredible. I'm not as big of a fan of Jackie, so going into Maria, I had some concerns. Mostly the fact is Maria Callas, who this movie is following, she's an opera singer, and this is her life as she retreats to France for the last few years of her life in the 1970s. The thing that worried me about it was I just had no attachment to Maria Callas, going into this movie. And I think that's specifically because unlike Jackie, who's a Kennedy, and unlike the film Spencer, which is Princess Diana, like, I don't know if I knew who Maria was before going into this movie. Like, I think I had heard the name, but when I had heard this movie announced that this was the next Pablo Larraín movie, I can't say instantly I'm like, oh yeah, that's who I know that is. Like, I probably had to look it up. So my interest level on it was a little low. Specifically, also something that I was wary of is, and maybe this is a hot take, I'm not necessarily a big Angelina Jolie fan as an actress. Like, her hit to bad ratio is pretty lackluster. She does not have a lot of films that I hold as great movies. She has some that she gives certainly good performances in, but I think she has a lot of really lackluster films in her career. I find her career, her IMDb page, to be pretty middling given the star power that she is. So I certainly had a lot of concerns going into this movie, and with this premise, with this character that I wasn't sure if I was going to find any emotional attachment to, with the story not being someone who is particularly well-versed in opera, this really sounded like a chore for me to get through. So it took me a few days when it finally debuted to Netflix to actually sit down and dedicate the time to watch Maria. And I'm actually glad I did, because this movie proved me wrong in a lot of ways. I actually think this movie has a lot of brilliance in it, and it's specifically centered to maybe the performance that obviously I had the most tentativeness towards, was the Angelina Jolie performance. I wasn't sure if Angelina Jolie was going to be able to deliver the powerhouse performance that somebody like Natalie Portman was able to give in Jackie, or that Kristen Stewart was able to deliver in Spencer. Much to my surprise, not only is Angelina of that challenge, she knocks it out of the park. I was pretty stunned by this performance from Angelina Jolie. I thought it was a really soulful, beautiful performance from her. And I think it's fascinating to see the parallels that it has to her life, especially with some of these stories and headlines and magazine news stories that have been all over the press recently, especially with her ex-husband. Like, how much of that has been in the news recently, how much she has been a public figure basically since, I mean, really the beginning of her career, but really escalated with the Brangelina stuff in 2005 post Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Like, she is truly one of the few celebrities who has been in the public eye forever and has been the focus of paparazzi scrutiny. So to be able to see that brought into this movie, and for her to be, if not playing off it, to at least be, I think, metatextual in some ways with that, I thought was a very fascinating thing to see a performer do. And I think she really delivers that very well. I think you get a real great understanding of why Maria is the way she is, and she's portrayed as a diva, and how that has messed with her brain, and how much of it in some ways is true. Like, this isn't an easy performance. This is not always a sympathetic performance towards Maria. This is somebody who believes themselves to be great. And with greatness usually comes a very high ego, and that is definitely displayed in this movie. So the fact that Jolie is able to hit all of those right notes and do it in a wonderful way that I found captivating, especially for someone that I wasn't as aware of, I thought she was pretty fantastic in this movie and deserving of all the praise that she has been early contributed to. I had kind of been saying when I do my Oscar predictions for this channel, which if you want to check them out, make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can see them on my page. But when I was talking about the best actress, I was just like, is Jolie really going to get in for this movie on a figure that maybe not as well known as Jackie Kennedy or Princess Diana? Like, this movie's already having a little bit of middling reviews compared to the other two. Like, is this going to happen? And no, it should happen. Jolie is of that degree great in Maria, and I think it's a performance that deserves to be praised. It especially really builds on well, and I think she does a really great job of introducing us to this character, showing the dimensions of this character. When this film takes flashbacks and we look at some of her previous relationships, I think it is all fascinating. And then when we get to the end, I think it's a pretty wonderful performance from Angelina Jolie, and she really just brings a lot of just humanity to a performance that I think could have really easily fallen into just devoid of life. And that's not what this performance is. And I think it's pretty wonderfully utilized within the context of this film. Now, I do want to say that I don't think Maria by any degree is perfect. Of the 3 films that Larrain has made of great historical figures of the 20th century, I could understand why Maria is the one that people gravitate the least towards. For me, I think Spencer is my favorite. I think Maria would be my second favorite. And then Jackie is my least of the favorite of the 3. But what Maria has that I don't think Jackie and Spencer have is I think there is a far bigger scope of narrative. And maybe this is me just misremembering the film Jackie, but I don't remember it spanning over years, which if I'm correct, this movie kind of does. Like, it goes back in the past, it goes her life, like it's going over a big chunk of her life. It feels far more autobiographical / biographical than either of those other 2 films did. I think those films are capturing moments. This film is capturing more of a long period of life. And that decision is not going to work for everyone, to be honest. In this movie, I thought that was the biggest drawback of this movie, is I kind of wanted it to stay focused. And when it just kind of becomes a biography movie, when we're going through the beats of this character's life or years through this character's life, I found it to go a little too fast. I found it to be quite standard in its approach. And I think that's what Larrain has always done really well, especially with like a film like Spencer, which I reviewed that. That was one of the first movies I reviewed on this channel back in 2021. And I remember loving that film. And the reason I loved it is how he is able to capture a feeling of what Princess Diana must have been felt like, trapped in the royal family and essentially trying to get through that and go through this divorce and kind of get a set freedom. That movie is so claustrophobic. This movie doesn't have really a feeling / tension that I could describe onto this movie outside of the Jolie performance. Everything else feels a little muted around her as a performer. I think everything is worse because of it. So Jolie is really able to define what this movie is, but the movie itself doesn't have a clear understanding of what it is, which is kind of a huge bummer for this. Now, while the script by Stephen Knight, like I said, I don't think is the strongest, I do want to then jump into the Pablo Larraín aspect of this movie as his direction, which is just as stunning as usual. I have been a big fan of how he directs, how he makes movies look, how he frames a shot, and that is beautifully executed in Maria. One of my favorite things is when a director can capture a mood and a spirit and a tonality in the world that he's doing it. And in this movie, it is largely France in the 1970s, and it has a lot of bright colors. It uses a lot of natural lights. We get a lot of autumn days in France. And what I love about this, and it's going to sound like such a condescending thing to say, or it's going to sound so intellectually stupid of me, like this is going to sound really film critic nerdy brain, and I really do apologize, but I like that this movie looks like a movie. This movie does not have this, oh, we're trying to capture a natural world as it exists today, so we're using far more muted colors. Like, this movie has a brightness in its color saturation. This movie looks like it was designed to be in theaters. And I think that really benefits the movie, and it really elevates the feelings of these characters. It really takes this character of Maria and almost puts her in another world. It really just kind of brings forth this detachment that Maria is having with reality, and this almost like pseudo wonderland that she lives in, where she is the boss, she is in control, she's the most important person to live in that time. I think that film and the way that this shot really conveys those emotions, and I really love how Pablo Larraín does it. There's one shot in particular where they are standing in front of a window, and there's this green overshade to the room. Like, it's a really stunningly beautiful use of color in a movie, and I was just pretty floored by Larraín's direction in it. I find him to be a quite captivating visual director, and I love to see him compose shots like this and have those shots in and of itself being able to just stop the movie. You could print it out and that could be a frame. That is a beautiful piece of art that he is able to communicate in his movies, and I think it adds so much to the texture of this movie. Ultimately, though, like I said, this movie just kind of falls flat just due to a story that I don't think always works. And there are certainly elements of this movie that I really like. One of the performers that I wanted to shout out in this movie, who is wonderful, he essentially plays her butler. It is Pierfrancesco Favino. He is wonderful in this movie, a great supporting person in this movie, really is by definition a supporting actor in this movie. He is there the entire time for her. You can see him wary, you can see him questioning her life, you can really see him pushing back, but also doesn't have the ability to be able to really defy her in any ways. And I think it's a great push movie with him, where he is trying to nudge her towards the correct direction, but he is unable to do so. So overall, like I said, I really liked Maria. Now, I had this issue, and I have this issue, I should say, with really all Netflix movies. This is a movie that I really wish I got to see in theaters. And I think the cinematography of this movie, I think everything would have clicked a little bit more. Netflix just has that ability, especially when I'm watching at home. In a movie, I am locking myself in. I am agreeing for 2 hours and 10 minutes. I am going to be captivated by this movie. I'm not checking my phone. I'm not doing anything else. I can't go answer anyone else's questions at that time. When I'm at home, I get interrupted. And even when I try to focus on it, there's just stuff that pulls me out of it. And it just becomes much harder to focus on a movie. So it ended up taking me, I think, 2 to 3 times to actually sit there and watch the movie. And I think that disconnect is going to be felt with anybody. I don't think it really affects my review of this movie, but I do significantly notice that while watching a Netflix movie like this, I think this movie probably would work a little bit better consuming. Like, I remember when I saw Spencer, I was at least able to project it in my home and see it on, I think, like at least 75 inches of my projector. And I remember I had my phone locked away. Like, I was really able to sit with the movie and let it exist. This one has a bit of a detachment with it. And I just don't think the story is ever able to captivate me as fully as maybe other of his films have been able to do. So ultimately, I understand while some people would say this is lesser Pablo Larraín, I totally get that. I'm not sure if I'm in full agreement. However, I can say in confidence, this is great Angelina Jolie. And that is the reason you should check out this movie, streaming now on Netflix. So in terms of a 5-star rating, I am going to give Maria 3 out of 5 stars, and I would recommend you checking it out. So thank you all for watching this video. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more.